In today's video, I'm going to build and paint my very first 135 scale model. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I'm working on this BTR-152 from SKIF in 135 scale. I don't know if I can call it like that. I decided to start this build with the engine. It was the part I already had a clear vision for in terms of modification, and honestly it was the smallest piece among the endless sea of plastic. And yes, the number of parts in this kit is terrifying. Compared to the 1/72 scale models I'm used to, this thing is overwhelming. I wasn't expecting this many components. While I was rambling, I pretty much finished assembling the engine, so I moved on to upgrading it. It lacked all the tiny tubes, wires and other engine bits. I thought, why not add the spark plugs? There should be 6 or 8 of them, depending on the version. And with that the engine mod was basically done. Later on, during painting, I'll tweak it a bit more, but the core build is finished. Here is what the painted engine looked like. I won't go into much detail, I decided to paint it separately from the rest of the model. And now it's finally time to change my cutting mat. Yes, I'll still be painting on the green one sometimes, but for building the chassis I'm switching to a new one. And honestly, I already like it more. Just look at how the parts pop against the background. Nothing blends in and the model really stands out. As I keep talking, you can see the chassis coming together in the background. I don't think it's necessary to comment on every little step. I'm mostly just reading the manual and putting everything together like a puzzle. Nothing too crazy here. But I do want to explain how I plan to upgrade the model. You already saw what I did with the engine. Now it's time to work on the driver's dashboard. I cut some rings from plastic tubing and glued them on to simulate instrument dials. Even though you won't really see the dashboard once the model's complete, I thought it was still worth it in detail. Then I decided to go further and added copper wires through a drilled hole to represent cabling. Here is how it turned out. I think it looks pretty cool and complements my model. After that I started building the rear section and installed the hinges for the back doors. I wanted to leave the doors open so you could peek inside. Technically this is the BTR-152K, which was a fully enclosed roof. But once I saw the quality of the upper parts in the kit, I quickly changed my mind. They were awful. So now it's just a standard BTR-152. Still, I stuck with my idea of keeping the rear doors open. Then it was time to assemble the whole. It's made up of the bottom plate and 2 large side panels. I won't bore you with the details. The front section is built separately because it has a lot of smaller parts. Once that was done, I turned my attention to the windows. I wanted to finally try making them by hand. I used a thick transparent plastic film and outlined it with wire to mimic the rubber seal. Then I added bullet damage to the glass, and yeah, I forgot to mention earlier that this model is meant to represent a vehicle used in Chernobyl exclusion zone after the disaster. I imagine that this BTR being pulled out of the storage for operations zone. It has good off-road capability and isn't too fuel hungry. As you can see, I heavily damaged the glass. I finished the detailing off camera and I'm really happy with how it turned out. For the right side window, I took a slightly different approach, which I will show you later. So here is how the model looks at this point. I moved on to adding the armored plates that protected the drivers and passenger from shrapnel. Now we start work with the interior. For the rear bench, I tried using coffee steer sticks to make a wooden seat. The kids' benches were awful, but the steer stick version didn't look great either, so I decided to 3D print the rear and left side benches. All the models I use are available on my Cults 3D page, and pattern supporters get access to all of them, either through the final post for this model or via my Discord channel. Even the $1 tier gets you Discord access, by the way. But back to the build. I didn't just 3D print the benches, I also modeled the seat backs and cushions for the rear compartment. The kit parts look too clean, like they belonged in a new vehicle. I wanted to show wear, neglect and decay. This is a stalker themed after all. So I made this torn-up seat, weathered by time and exposure. I think it fits the post-apocalyptic vibe really well. At this point I would love to keep showing you progress, but again I lost a chunk of the video footage. I also printed headlight guards since the footage that came with the kit was in terrible condition. This kit is very old and the decals and footage didn't age well due to poor storage before I got it. So, well, time to paint. I started with a matte black primer. For the base color I choose Vallejo US Dark Green. It looked good and matched the tone I wanted. I painted all the parts in that color, and I didn't install the front hood and left door yet to give myself more room to maneuver while painting. Next I mixed a lighter tone and applied it in a mottling pattern to break up the base layer. It gives the paint a sun-faded, worn appearance, a great starting point for further weathering. For the interior, I went with white. I saw several real photos of this vehicle and some interior were green, some rusted, but one was white. And I really liked the contrast to that grey with a darker exterior. So the entire interior got a white coat, including the inner side of the doors. And when all of this was done, it's time to do some chipping. My favorite technique, using a sponge and acrylic retarders. I wanted this BTR to look seriously beaten up, so I went all in. Some spots might look overdone, maybe even sloppy, but that's okay. There will be so many layers of effect later on that everything will blend in. And besides, the more weathered it looks, the more it fits the theme of abandoned, contaminated tech. After drying, the chips toned down a bit anyway. As you can see, I really didn't hold back. The entire model is covered in chips and I think it works. That means it's time for decals, or in this case hand-painted markings. I didn't have any decals, so I used a misprinted 3D printed barrel to trace a ring and hand-paint the word "zone", a reference to how vehicles were marked during Chernobyl cleanup operation. After this marking, I painted the number 710 by hand. Simple shapes, easy to pull off at this scale, and not too cringy. Plus it makes sense if the vehicle was rushed out of storage. The markings might have been painted manually anyway. After that I added edge highlights with lighter green to help the details stand out and keep the model from looking flat. And then came rust. I started with light rust tones on the top surfaces. And let me tell you, painting rust on 135 is way more comfortable than on 172nd. There are just more room to work, but eventually I realized that darker rust looked better as the base. So I sponged that all over the vehicle. It turned out amazing. The dark rust settled nicely into place. On the right side I went heavier with rust, since that part of the vehicle will be more exposed on the diorama. The left side will be partially shielded by a fence. Once that layer dried, I added a second rust color, brighter and more orange. Again, using a sponge. I didn't hold back, and honestly it was the right choice. The color mix came out perfect. Some of it still needed to dry, but the harmony of tones was already clear. While waiting, I glued in broken pieces of the right window, inspired by a real BRDM photo I found from Chernobyl. I'll also stick a lock through the left window later, to make it look like a branch smashed through. Meanwhile, the wheels got painted, nothing fancy here, just rubber in a rubber color. Now I moved on to the door, adding both dark and light rust. Since it's slightly protected by the fence on the diorama, I didn't go too crazy. On the bottom part, though, I applied more, as this vehicle will be partially submerged in a swamp on the diorama. I haven't figured out exactly how I will do that yet. Maybe half submerged wheels in epoxy resin, but I'll experiment directly on the diorama. After finishing small details, I returned to the interior. Fuel tanks, seats and bench frames got painted in green military color. It may have been easier to paint them before installing, but again, 135 is forgiven. The interior boxes and canister got the same green. Everything was green back then. The torn seat bits were painted in a brown leather. You can still see some Zentel highlight peeking through, so I didn't overdo the color variation, just enough to sell the idea. Some light damage was added to the interior walls, along with a bit of rust. I won't lie, this effect looked weak. I probably should gone with green for the whole interior, but hey, you work with what you got. And now it's time to weather the interior details. If you are familiar with Stalker, you might ask, why is all this gear, ammo boxes, shell crates, jerry cans still here? Why didn't Stalkers or looters take it? The answer is radiation. These items are all highly irradiated and unusable. While talking, I finished weathering the interior crates. I used some light chipping, but realized too late it needed dark tones. Hopefully, it won't look too out of place in the final result. And now it's time to paint the crew benches. Nothing tricky, just military green, same as before. While they dried, I added fresh rust highlights, a must for a vehicle left under open skies. Weather anomalies, maybe even burning pollen, all of it could have damaged the BTR. So I added a lot of bright rust, even if it looks odd now. Trust me, once everything blended, it looked amazing, and honestly, I'm really proud of how the rust effect turned out. I worked on this model for a month, poured my soul into it, and I think I earned it right to be proud. So, haters, goodbye, to everyone else, thank you so much. While I was talking, I also weathered the crates and wooden parts with a sponge. Then I painted the fire extinguisher red, and it was time for a wash. I made a heavy one, not too runny, to simulate grime and dust buildup. On the side, I applied the wash in thick lines, then pulled it downward with a brush to create streaks. I tested this dirt streaking method on this model and I think it worked great. Sure, the interior looks awful at this stage, but don't worry, that's just base layer. Everything will be blended and refined later. And here is how the wash looks. I think it turned out great. For the interior, I carefully clean up excess wash off camera. It's not very interesting to watch anyway. Once dried, the model looks like this, which meant it was time for the next step. I used the light olive oil paint to add filters and remove some faded areas, helping the main green base come back through the rust and wash layers. It might look strange now, but once it dried and blends in, the result is fantastic. Then I added rusty streaks, not too many, just enough to enhance realism. Before they dry, it's hard to judge, so you'll see the final effect at the end. I also added highlights of light rust with oil paint and blended them into improve realism. I was shocked at how much this elevated the whole look. I didn't think such effect would work on 135 scale, but they absolutely do. So no, I'm not switching entirely to 135, but I will revisit it from time to time. I added a little rust inside the interior too, combining with grime. Then I applied a very diluted olive wash across the entire model to enrich the color. Just look at it. I'm really happy with the outcome. A bit of dirt in the interior was the final touch. It needed splashes and specks after so much time outdoors. And finally, time to glue in the engine and hood. It makes a huge difference, just look how good it looks now. I also added some inner door weathering and glued everything else in place. Then came the last part, the right window's protective grille. I imagined someone tried to rip off, maybe stalkers or looters, and then gave up once they realized it was radioactive. I added some dry grass inside the cabin and broken glass near the front. And that's it, the model is complete. I think it turned out really well. Let me know what you think in the comment. This was my first serious 135 build, and I'm pretty happy with it. Yes, the wheels could use more work, but I plan to build a swampy diorama, and I'll figure out how to make them half submerged in resin. That's something I'll do on the diorama itself. For now, like the video if you want, subscribe if you feel like it, and comment even if you don't. Seriously, comments help a lot. All the models and bits used here are on my Culture page. Patreon supporters get them for free. Links in the description. Also use the promo codes on the screen for a discount. Maybe it's tags with bundles, I haven't checked. And of course, it's time to say thank you for my first Patreon. Thank you so much, my dear friend. And that's all for now. Share your thoughts and let me know how your own scale transition went. Like when you switched from tanks to cars, or cars to planes, or tanks to planes, something like that. I would love to read your stories. As always, this was Vlad from the No Quality Dioramas, and see you next time if some Russian bombs don't kill me. I'm joking. I think I'll be good. Again, thank you so much and see you next time.